What is for humanity? We are a nonprofit charitable organization built for a singular mission to examine and analyze downside risk associated with AI and autonomous systems, and where possible, to identify risk mitigations, to manage those downside risks and get the best possible result from these systems for humanity. We are a volunteer-driven organization with 450 contributors and fellows from 46 countries around the world, building an infrastructure of trust with independent audit of AI systems. A crowdsourced process where we've drafted over 5,000 lines of audit criteria for AI and autonomous systems of many kinds. We provide these audit rules to governments and regulators. We do not have authority and we do not seek authority. We aim to be a service provider to governments and regulators around the world. We also advise and train those jurisdictions about the roles and responsibilities that exist in an infrastructure of trust. A big part of this process is to ensure human agency remains over these systems, requiring diverse inputs and multi-stakeholder feedback, not at the outcomes level, but at the design, development, and risk assessment level, to ensure feedback loops to manage these risks and maximize perspectives. We also have identified accountability and governance structures inside organizations to ensure that compliance is met. Our approach is multi-vector. It focuses on 5 specific categories that are a holistic approach to AI and autonomous systems: ethics, bias, privacy, trust, and cybersecurity. What we do is an art. We craft laws, regulations, guidelines, and standards into auditable rules. That means they are binary, and auditors are able to correctly assess if compliance has been met or not met. We also work with accreditation services to create a process for accrediting entities to issue certifications of compliance. And finally, we train and certify individuals to perform audit and pre-audit service, for humanity is not an auditor nor a pre-audit service provider. We do this training to ensure that individuals know how to certify companies, how to see compliance, how to recognize that documentary evidence has satisfied these criteria. And we also provide a body of knowledge, a way to see when complex issues of compliance have met sufficient and necessary standards to achieve compliance and to mitigate risks to humans. This is who we are, this is what we do, and we do it on behalf of humanity.
Hello, I'm Sarah Clark. I'm one of the For Humanity Fellows, and I was asked to talk a little bit about the body of knowledge and how that relates to what For Humanity does in general.
My name is Joshua Buckley. I'm a fellow for for Humanity, and I'm here today to offer a peek into some of the work that For Humanity is doing, in particular with regards to the BOK, or the body of knowledge.
The For Humanity body of knowledge is information and reference points and benchmarks and external guidance that links to the subsets of criteria that we have in our For Humanity audits. We've built all these audit criteria, and we realize that if we're training certified auditors across all of these varying domains, across privacy, bias, ethics, security, trust, we need to make sure that they have confidence in the depth of knowledge necessary to work out if something is a sufficient control, to look for signs that it may be in insufficient control to pass the audit, and to signpost best practice or mature practice and ways to reach that point. The body of knowledge is split down into discipline relevant knowledge stores. Those knowledge stores have owners. Oftentimes those owners are not what you might consider to be a subject matter expert in the field, but what they are doing is gathering together those people with the very best current knowledge in those fields and coordinating the input into a standard format so we can share that with our certified auditors as part of the accredited training courses that we're offering to enable people to then perform audits against our criteria.
As Sarah mentioned, the BOK is a repository of best practices that is designed to supplement the learning outcomes and audit rules that make up For Humanity's audit certification. Let's take the Code of Ethics knowledge store, for example. We see that line 17 in the audit states that an entity shall have a code of ethics adhering to industry standards and in compliance with the relevant legal frameworks, and that this code shall be published in the entity's employee handbook. But what are industry standards for a code of ethics? What should an auditor look for when judging the quality of a code of ethics? How can an auditor tell whether an entity's code of ethics appropriately sets out the legal frameworks that are relevant to said code and the entity in question? These are the kinds of questions that can influence the confidence with which an auditor is able to make his or her determinations about compliance. And they are the kinds of questions that the BOK in general, and knowledge stores in particular, are designed to clarify. As a result, each knowledge store puts forward a detailed definition of the concept in question, as well as setting out a list of criteria for sufficiency, things that must be present within the code of ethics for an auditor to confidently make an assertion about compliance, as well as indicators of maturity, things which, if present, signal that the code of ethics goes above and beyond what is required by the auditor. In the case of codes of ethics, sufficiency includes things like, was the code drafted and is it kept up to date by the entity's ethics committee? Does it clearly set out the entity's shared moral framework? And does it contain compliance-based, value-based, and fiduciary-based commitments or considerations? Indicators of maturity, on the other hand, include things like, does the code provide explicit context to the sorts of ethical choices that employees will be making? Does it include a commitment to making employees aware of the code and its contents? Is the code long enough to provide enough detail, but short enough to act as a reasonable and usable ethical guide for employees? Overall, the BOK and knowledge stores like that for the Code of Ethics are integral to the work that For Humanity does, will be integral to the work that auditors do, and can be an amazing place to get started as a new contributor or fellow. So I urge you all to get involved and would like to invite anyone who is interested or who has any questions to reach out to Sarah, Ryan, or myself for more information.
We will only be able to create this infrastructure of trust, this audit of AI on behalf of humanity, for humanity, if we invite everybody to the table and incorporate the best of those views into the best kind of guidance. Center.
Just 2 years ago, the notion that artificial intelligence would become a mainstay of HR departments seemed closer to science fiction than reality for most Americans. Fast forward to 2021, and the pandemic has transformed the way we work, accelerating the rate at which employers have adopted AI-based HR technologies. 86% of major US corporations now predict that AI will become a mainstream technology at their company this year. And 83% of HR leaders report relying on some form of technology in employment decision-making. This turn to AI-driven HR technologies did not happen overnight. AI has been involved in making decisions in every stage of the job life cycles for years. So it recruits and hires, it evaluates and promotes, it identifies candidates for reskilling and upskilling, and it even terminates employees. It writes job descriptions, screens resumes, and conducts job interviews. We cannot fully realize the potential of AI technologies for the American people and for the global economy unless those technologies are applied in a manner consistent with our laws and our values.
Because in AI systems, we face complexities, opacity, unpredictability. We face a degree of autonomy in the learning of these programs, which has great upsides, but also risks. And of course, we face the combination of these new algorithms with big data, and therefore all the issues which we address in Europe through the General Data Protection Regulation also pertain to AI. And it is very clear that whenever AI processes personal data of people, meaning data which either identifies an individual directly or makes it possible to identify an individual, then GDPR is applicable. The purpose of our regulation is to address safety risks, fundamental rights risks, to make enforcement of the rules possible towards the producers and users in terms of companies using AI. We want to address legal uncertainties, and this is very important in the common market of Europe. We want to avoid that our 27 member states start putting in place separate rules, thus a fragmentation of the market comes into play. But we want to maintain the internal market with one set of rules. And I just use the opportunity to make it clear that, of course, this unity of law in Europe is of particular interest also to American companies, which we are, of course, very open to for operations. They benefit when they are very big in AI and digital economy. We have a lot of very big American companies. They benefit often most from the unity of law in Europe, because that means they don't have to comply with 27 regulatory regimes, but just with one. So
when we began developing the AI accountability framework, we really wanted to understand the landscape. And what we quickly understood was that there were a lot of principles. For Commissioner Sonderling and Paul's comments, our OECD partners in the U.S. government through executive orders, there was a lot of guidance and aspirational goals around what AI should be. AI should be ethical, AI should be accountable, AI should be responsible. But we hadn't reached a stage in terms of how to operationalize those concepts. And the framework that we've developed really is a practitioner's, auditor's, third-party assessor's guide to auditing AI systems. And that's really the angle by which we developed it. We also initiated our work by convening an expert panel of academics, industry experts, nonprofits, inspector IGs, federal agencies, and we pulled everyone in a room together, a virtual room. This was September of 2020. And we talked about what factors should we consider when we're thinking about auditing and third-party assessments of AI. The landscape of AI, the complexities and the opaqueness of AI systems already create some challenges in the public sector. So the evaluators, the third-party assessors often come from a non-technical background, but we'll need to have some sense of how to approach these systems. So we wanted to use really language that was comfortable in the auditing community, the notion of governance, data reliability, performance management, and continuous monitoring. And these are the 4 principles that you will see in our framework. And for each principle, we disaggregated at 2 levels. We wanted to be at the organizational, the macro level. So when we're talking about governance, we're talking at the agency, the institutional level, in terms of establishing clear roles and responsibilities, clear goals and objectives for the system, ensuring the workforce skills and expertise are appropriate for evaluating AI systems. And then we also wanted to take it down to the system level, that the data scientist community needed to think about technical specifications and documenting them. When they're identifying their variables and the attributes and the characteristics, that those are actually documented for a third-party assessor. So for each principle, what you will notice is a 2-level disaggregation to further kind of tease out the concepts.
What do we mean by accreditation? These are definitions that I've taken from the ISO, the International Standards Organization website. And if we start with certification, that is the provision by an independent body of written assurance, usually a certificate, that the product, service, or system in question meets specific requirements. And then what we mean by accreditation is the formal recognition by an independent body, in our case UCAS, generally known as an accreditation body, that a certification body operates according to international standards. So accreditation is the higher level that then approves certification bodies who in turn approve products or systems or services. And I'm making this point because the words accreditation, certification, approval, they do get sort of bandied around quite loosely, but in our world, they have quite specific meanings, and as I say, are defined in the ISO standard documents.
Good morning, and welcome to the second day of the For Humanity at Go conference. Accountability and trust leads to governance and oversight for humanity. I am Arzu Shipstone, your host and the coordinator for this special event. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of addressing you from the beautiful city of Istanbul and welcoming nearly 500 guests from all over the world. We are looking forward to having another fantastic day on the second day of the conference. We have an agenda packed with debates around the different IE use cases by the key industry leaders in their respective fields. But before we look ahead, I would like to have a little bit of a moment to focus on key highlights from the first day of the conference. And to do that, I'm delighted to have Ryan Carey with me, the Executive Director for Humanity and the Chairperson for our Board of Directors. Welcome, Ryan. Absolutely.
Thank you, Arthur, and thank you to you and Sundar and all the volunteers who've been helping to make the conference work, and it takes a village, and we've proven that behind the scenes. Even if,
Absolutely.
It doesn't show up out front, which is great.
Then let me take this opportunity to thank you for stepping in for me yesterday. So when we had the technical glitch, so it was really appreciated. So you played the host, and I'm very, very much appreciating for that.
No worries. No worries.
Okay. Ryan, I think you would agree with me if I say that we had a fantastic day yesterday. We had, more than 600 people visiting our conference website, over 100 questions posed to the panels and panelists through the interactive channels. And we actually interacted so many people who are so new to For Humanity. What was your feeling? What was your experience of yesterday?
That was my favorite part is, we have this, sometimes I kind of joke about the name, right? It's a silly name, For Humanity, because it's an impossibility, right? Can we be for everybody? But it doesn't keep us from trying. And so that's what this conference is, right? This conference is trying to reach more and more and more people. And so just, being able to interact, we saw many registrations on the website. We had, just as you mentioned, lots and lots of questions, interactions, social media everywhere. That's the point, right? That's what we got to achieve by talking with more people, engaging with more people, getting more feedback, because that's what makes the audit criteria we create, that's what makes this whole process of building an infrastructure of trust better, is by having more and more perspectives at the table.
And that's really just coming back to why the reflection from yesterday is so important for us. If you go back to some of the key takeaways from yesterday, I think one of the highlights for me was that I heard so many of our expert speakers and practitioners underline why the independent audit of IE systems is more important than ever today. In a way, it was really great to hear Paul Nimitz actually underlining that human needs to know that they're interacting with the IE. And he actually linked this with the, being part of human, being a part of human dignity and determination. As an individual who founded For Humanity for the sole purpose of putting the human at the center of, at the heart of the IE discussions, how was your feeling about when you heard that comment coming through the, global regulators panel?
Yeah, it's very gratifying. It shows that the work that we aim to accomplish seems to be aligned with the regulatory point of view. But I also heard yesterday that that's not the case everywhere, and that there's process that we're going through. I heard interesting comments about sufficiency of law, which I don't agree with. In different jurisdictions, and let's pick out a few to talk about those things.
Yeah, that's important.
The EU Artificial Intelligence Act is forward-looking in terms of human agency, in terms of post-market monitoring, in terms of data quality, in terms of representativeness. It achieves a lot of goals. At the same time, it was very weak. It was insufficient in terms of looking at the impact on children, which is a little odd because, a lot of this can be attributed to politics, Brexit, and the difficulties between the EU and the UK. But when they're crafting that law, the Children's Code is already law in the UK. Mm-hmm. And to neglect that in the EU Artificial Intelligence Act is unfortunate. Doesn't mean it can't be remedied. Doesn't mean we don't go through a process. But you can see where these harmonizations will be a process and will take time to achieve. And then in the United States, we have some fantastic laws. Keith talked about how, in terms of regulating bias and keeping that out of the hiring process, we probably already have the laws in place. And there I would agree with him. I think he and the EEOC are very well armed to tackle the concern of artificial intelligence being applied to hiring, onboarding, compensation, and so on. But I don't think that's true when it comes to data privacy, protections, the actual applications of artificial intelligence to these spaces increases risk, and we need to deal with that. And so, I think there were a lot of truths. I also think we highlighted places of harmony, even transatlantic harmony.
Yes.
But I also think we highlighted some areas of weakness and places we can improve, which is, maybe that's the best result of a conference like this.
Yeah, I think we certainly hear that we wanted the actually regulators wanted to continue that conversation, which was a great thing for us. I think it's something to look forward to. But also the point that you are making is bringing me nicely to the next question that I would like to reflect with you, because what was really interesting to me that, as well as everybody accepting that it is very relevant, the independent audit of IE systems to today's discussion, it was actually, really apparent to us that, it is not something that fully exists yet. It's not. It's something that we have to build, and we have to design, we have to build, and we have to put into practice. And that was very, very key in all the conversations that we actually seen throughout the day. And in doing so, I think that what is really important is that we have a kind of a significant opportunity to address many of the interconnected challenges that we face as a humanity today. And again, I'm going back to Dan Consul Sunderland's comment around this, because he actually was really clear that IE was making many of the decisions, all kinds of decisions that were made by HR professionals just, a decade ago. But he also said that he is, and I quote, he's committed to ensure that AI helps to eliminate, rather than exuberate, the bias in employment decisions. So again, I'm asking you, as a leader of an organization which is operating in this very space, what is your reflection on that? And what does it make you feel about the future efforts by the industry and by, like, non-profit bodies like ourselves?
If there was one thread from the beginning of the conference to the very end of the conference, it's that we're still in a stage of education and awareness. That was the consistent thread through every panel, where we're still learning. We had the GAO say that they were ignoring ethics. Now, there was an intentionality to that. There's a politics to that. There's a avoidance of trying to impose an ethical or a moral framework. Totally get it, right? I say it as a criticism, but it's also an understood criticism and might be positioning one. Mm-hmm. But then in the very next panel, we have Enrica Panay talking about how you can bring ethics and require ethics. And what this highlights is the difference in education and awareness of what can be done through independent audit of AI systems by bringing third-party oversight to these systems. So let me take a poignant example, which is Facebook. We built a code of ethics body of knowledge. Josh referenced it in the top for those who are here, right at the top of the hour. Mm-hmm. And in that, we looked at both sufficiency and maturity of codes of ethics. And what's really interesting, we chuckled at it actually in the first moment, is Facebook has a wonderful code of ethics. The published code of ethics is sufficient, if not mature. And at first we laughed at that. We were like, how could this be? But the answer is it's one thing to talk about ethics, and it's another thing to be able to document compliance, system, and process of implementing ethics all throughout the process in the organization. And that was what Enrico was highlighting, which is we don't have to dictate a moral framework. We shouldn't dictate a moral framework beyond some very basic things like transparency, human dignity, right? The accountability. These are things that the vast majority of us can agree on, okay? But afterwards, we can hold people accountable for, are you applying your own moral framework? And so this just, for me, highlights the education and awareness processes at the very beginning. I think when we talked with the industry practitioners at the end about the revenue levels associated with independent audit, where it's headed, where it could go vis-a-vis audit, financial audit, which is a $55 billion industry last year, and audit around AI and our 5 pillars of ethics, bias, privacy, trust, and cybersecurity. Maybe the revenues around that are tens of millions of dollars.
Okay, I will stop you there because I want you to reflect on this, because and then quickly, because we are running out of time and we have got a special agenda pack for people today. It was really great to see how the industry leaders interacted in these very topics that we are talking about in your in the panel that you moderated yesterday. And I think this raising awareness has come in terms of the C-suite level, has come about again and again from all the practitioners in terms of what needs to be done, and accompanied by creating a better understanding of becoming a responsible enterprise. So, and they actually use this in a way to actually shift the companies from a compliance-driven space to an intention and purpose-driven action. And again, I'm asking you, especially because at the end of that discussion, we had a little bit of a disagreement between the industry leaders as to how this may lead to us, where this may lead to us. Could you please tell me, what was your take on that? And how did you feel about that, about positioning for humanity's efforts for the future, from what you heard from the panelists?
My take on that is very pragmatic, and my response here will be very pragmatic as I have to run and go do some work behind the scenes here. So we're going to be pragmatic. And the answer is, you go where you can solve problems. If the C-suite is ready to solve a problem, solve it there. If the designers and developers are ready to solve a problem at their level, you solve it there. But you have many conversations you bring the appropriate discussion to each one of those spaces. And when someone is empowered or ready to move ahead and to make things better, that's where you go. And I think that's one of the reasons that disagreement, I mean, it wasn't a,
It wasn't a real disagreement, but it was a perspective. Put it that way.
It was more of a, we're having some success here and you're having some success here kind of thing. Yeah. And the answer is awesome, right? Great that everybody's having success, and let's create enough solutions, enough empowerment, enough structure, enough support that more and more and more people can have these kinds of empowered discussions. So I'm going to run on that note, but I'm going to let you do the closeout here, and I wish everybody a great day in all of these panels and sessions. Keep the questions coming. And I'm now going to moderate the children's code as well, because unfortunately our Jackie Hughes, who is a board member, is still recovering from surgery. She's desperate that she couldn't make it to moderate the panel, but I'm going to do my best to fill in for her on children's online services and toys. So we'll see you all there. And thank you. Yep. Cheers.
Okay. Thank you very much. Oh yes, it would have been great to continue this conversation, but you can see we need to stop here to provide you all audience a brief overview of what we are going to experience today. On the second day, as we have been saying, that we will be bringing together the leading industry experts to share insight about the special use cases and to learn from them via 6 different industry panels that we are going to run. We do have a slightly different structure today. We are running 2 different tracks all through the day and until the next, final networking sessions that we are going to see. In track 1, we are going to see 3 different sessions: autonomous vehicles, human resources and hiring, and children's services and online toys. And track 2, going to run concurrently with track 1, will feature finance, healthcare, and space systems and industry panels. So you are going to hopefully see that we are going to focus all through the day and discover how governments and businesses can work together to use independent audit practices to support solutions to global IE challenges. So for these 2 tracks, you would have been auto-registered already in one of these tracks as part of the overall registration process. And it was really, really easy to move from one track to another. So hopefully you will be able to see the parallel stage button at the top of your agenda pages as you actually come into the Hubula site in the conference infrastructure. Today, you just need to click on that to see all the panels listed. You don't need to just join the panel of your choosing, and registration is just so easy. Just click on a button. Hopefully, we are going to run some videos all through the day for you to be able to make that transition and switch very easily all through the day, okay? And I'm pleased to also say that we are actually going to have some additional video content, featured videos that's going to actually, present you or give you more information about For Humanity's work in these different spaces. So hopefully you can engage more in terms of your questions, starting from those videos as a minimum starting point, basically. So right, as you can see, we've got another day, packed agenda, a lot to cover and a lot to look forward to. So let's go and take our selected virtual seats on the next 2 concurrent sessions that's going to be run just in 5 minutes. So enjoy the day and do not forget, I'm looking forward to seeing you again at the end of the networking sessions. And thank you for being with us.
I am Nadine Felber, a Fellow of For Humanity. For Humanity is laying the foundation for an infrastructure of trust with independent audit of AI systems. Independent audit of AI systems can help mitigate risks in AI and autonomous systems. Are you aware of what independent audit of AI systems is? IAAIS is an operational audit framework to provide assurance and mitigate risks from AI and autonomous systems. The components of an audit framework are criteria and certification schemes. What are criteria? Criteria are a set of questions to evaluate if an AI or autonomous system is ethical, unbiased, privacy compliant, secure, and trustworthy. The criteria encompass 5 pillars, namely ethics, bias, privacy, cybersecurity, and trust, helping manage all risks to humans from these systems. Now let's get to the next part. The sum of criteria together form a scheme. Once a scheme is approved by regulators, it can be used to certify a company's compliance. Are you still confused? Here is an example. The UK Children's Code expects organizations to consider the best interests of the child while providing online services for children. In this context, a criterion is to verify whether the company's ethics committee examined, considered, deployed, and disclosed risk mitigations to protect the best interests of the child. We are examining whether the ethics officer considered critical aspects. And for humanity, more than 450 contributors and 37 fellows are crowdsourcing criteria to mitigate risks from AI. criteria and certification schemes. What are criteria? Criteria are a set of questions to evaluate if an AI or autonomous system is ethical, unbiased, privacy-compliant, secure, and trustworthy. The criteria encompass 5 pillars, namely ethics, bias, privacy, cybersecurity, and trust, helping manage all risks to humans from these systems. Now let's get to the next part. The sum of criteria together form a scheme. Once a scheme is approved by regulators, it can be used to certify a company's compliance. Are you still confused? Here is an example. The UK Children's Code expects organizations to consider the best interests of a child while providing online services for children. In this context, a criterion is to verify whether the company's ethics committee examined, considered, deployed, and disclosed risk mitigations to protect the best interests of the child. We are examining whether the ethics officer considered critical aspects. At For Humanity, more than 450 contributors and 37 fellows are crowdsourcing criteria to mitigate risks from AI or autonomous systems. Everything to build an infrastructure of trust